Hello everyone, I welcome you once more to another exciting discussion, and today I simply want to, in brief, to talk about prophets. I don't know how many times I've heard people asking me, asking other people, how can I know a true prophet of God and a false prophet of God? Now in this podcast I simply want to talk about biblical test of a true prophet of God and a false prophet of God. So there's just a lot to talk about prophets today, especially in our continent of Africa. Some people are for the view that we no longer have prophets. We no longer have spokesmen of God. We no longer have, people who speaks the mind of God or the will of God to his people. While other people are for the view that, hold on, we still have such people. Now, by definition, a prophet is God's spokesperson. Is a person who speaks for God, who speaks the will or the mind of God to the people. But what did it mean to be a prophet of God in the Bible? What does it mean to be a prophet of God in the Bible? Now, in the Bible, we see two major biblical tests of a prophet of God. We see two major now these are not the only ones, but we see two major biblical tests of a prophet of God. Number one, a prophet of God is one approved and commissioned by God. A perfect example of this is Isaiah 6. And we read Isaiah 6 verse 1 to 9. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the foundations of the thresholds shook at the voice of him who called. And the house was filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me, for I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth and said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilty is taken away, and your sin atoned for. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? Then I said, Here I am, Lord, send me. And he said, Go and say to these people, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Now, this is a perfect example that a prophet of God was one who was approved and commissioned by God. You recall the story of Jeremiah in Jeremiah chapter 1, where God said, Before you were born, I knew you, I chose you, I selected you to be my prophet to my people. Number 2, a prophet of God was and is one who has stood in the counsel of God. Now, I borrowed this from Dr. Michael Heiser, an Old Testament scholar or authority. He says that a prophet of Yahweh is one who has stood in the counsel of God or in the presence of God. And a good example of this again is Jeremiah. Now, let's read Jeremiah 23, verse 16 to 18, and I'll skip to verse 21 and 22. Where the Bible reads, Thus says the Lord of hosts, do not listen to the words of the prophets who prophesy to you, filling you with vain hopes. They speak visions of their own minds, not from the mouth of the Lord. They say continually to those who despise the word of the Lord, It shall be well with you. And to everyone who stubbornly follows their own heart, they say to them, No disaster shall come upon you. For who among them has stood in the counsel of the Lord to see and to hear his word? Or who has paid attention to his word and listened? I did not send the prophets, yet they ran. I did not speak to them, yet they prophesied. But if they had stood in my counsel or in my presence, then they would have proclaimed my words to my people, and they would have turned them from their evil way and from the evil of their deeds. Now, this shows us that a prophet of God is one who has stood in the counsel of God. Okay, this was the second test of a prophet of God, one who stood in the presence or in the counsel of God. Now, I want you to think of any prophet in the Bible or a prophetess in the Bible who was not approved by God, who was never commissioned by God, who never stood in God's counsel, and yet he was a true prophet of God. None. Every prophet of God whom God spoke to, they were commissioned by God. They stood in his presence or in his counsel. Okay? So you don't find any prophet in the Bible who spoke for God, and yet they were never commissioned by him or approved by him, and never stood in his presence or in his counsel. Think of Moses, Elijah, Deborah, Abraham, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Amos, Joel. All of these men and women, they were approved by God, they were commissioned by Yahweh, and they stood in his presence or in his counsel. So the question is not whether we still have prophets or not. The question we should be asking is, have you been approved and commissioned by God? Have you stood before the counsel of God? These are the questions we should be asking.